This is Matthew McConaughey.
Natalie Portman.
James Patterson.
Michael Ian Black.
And you are listening to
Five Questions
with Dan Schawbel.
Mena, welcome to Five Questions.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
With the breakout releases of American Beauty and American Pie, you were living a double life being a Hollywood star while dealing with an abusive relationship at home. How did you manage those two different realities?
Oh, gosh. I managed the best way that I could. I talk a lot about self-medicating, which was not the healthiest thing for me at the time, but I was in survival mode. I've since then learned healthier ways to cope. But back then, I try to talk about in the book how I feel that my professional life, work, art saved me. It gave me that opportunity to get out of that relationship in many different ways. I think that I try to view that as the gift that was given to me to help me navigate in a healthier way of what I was going through back then.
I find that as being very common of people using, art as a release, as a way of, having some therapy in your life and an outlet of sorts. And of course, you've been through a lot, and it's very difficult because people see you as being, famous and wealthy, yet behind the scenes, what people aren't seeing is the suffering. So it's definitely, that must have been really hard to deal with both.
Yeah, it was. And I try to discuss that. I felt like I was sort of built up to what I felt have to hold that image. So yes, it was very difficult to be able to navigate because I felt like I didn't have any of the inner components to be able to do that. I've learned that now. I was just sort of, doing, getting to the next step, doing what I needed to do just to get by without even really thinking of it.
In your memoir, you talk about an accident you had while horseback riding. How did that moment lead you down this road of facing your trauma and accepting yourself?
That was just another moment of what I was trying to show, of how there have been so many times where I feel like I should have died and I'm still here. And that was just another epic moment. I went into depth more about a lot of those moments, but then now with what we have in the book, I just sort of list some of those. But I fell off a 30-foot cliff when I was about 8. So that was just another moment to show where I felt like I wasn't listening. And I talk about how I felt like I was pushing it because there was a voice in the back of my head that was sort of saying like, you're pushing it, you're going too fast. And I wasn't listening. I was always testing and I felt like trying to prove my point on how I wasn't accepted or I wasn't understood. And it was just to show that I always was, that there was always this care and consideration around me. And that trip, that moment, it was like this out of body experience. I truly felt that I should not be here anymore. And I learned about Ted Andrews and animal speak through that trip. And it really just opened me up. I had this moment of just really trying to understand what happened. I was always trying to find my place on, how did I make it out of that again alive? And I guess that put me into the place of, well, what am I going to do with it then? If I keep trying to fight and prove my point that, I have no value or there's no reason for me to be here, but yet I'm shown over and over again that there is something, then what is that? And what can I do with it?
And that sets you on a journey of self-discovery as well.
Self-discovery and just wanting to give back.
Yeah. And you've done a lot philanthropically too. So that just shows you that, it's not just about your career, it's about giving back. And you've learned so much through through all of these incidents and the trauma and everything that you've experienced. And now you're at a point where you write a book called The Great Peace. So can you
But now I
describe?
feel like I can give back in the way that I've always wanted to. So
Yeah, and
that's
you've said
what
that like the Me Too movement has helped you, and you've recognized what your voice is, and now you can, release this memoir and kind of take, stage again, but in a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to do a lot of work with, for instance, Vista Del Mar, with kids, disadvantaged youth. I mean, that have gone through so much. But even then, I wasn't able to share my story. Now I feel like I finally truly can, and like I can really do that work now. So that I really enjoy. I feel like I can really do the work that I've always wanted to do. It was like getting out of my own way. I needed to break that image of what I felt like I was holding myself back from. Yeah.
And what does it mean to you to make peace with everything you've been through over the past several decades?
Gosh, just
What is that feeling?
just ease. Like I can breathe. That's the thing. It's so I have use the word weird and strange, and it's like mystifying to me, talking about this and this process and what I've done. It's just something that I felt I needed to do. It was just so necessary. I feel calmer. But yet I feel like I understand how that's unusual to a lot of people. But that just feels good to me. I feel like I said, I can finally, I was trying to wrap my head around this yesterday, because it's like, I'm experiencing so much in the release and talking about this book. And it seems to me like I can finally do the work that I've always wanted to do, because I can incorporate it. It's not like, I can do so much work and there's an interest because of, maybe something I've built for myself, or that name, or, whatever I've professionally built for myself. It's like, now I can truly share. I can do more of the work in a real way by actually sharing my story. And it's not just like who I am talking about it. There's more value. And so that excites me.
Yeah. And there's more of a connection too. Who you are in the media is who you are in real life. It's much more interrelated and connected now, and you can just kind of be yourself, and you've had a lot of the time to reflect. And part of the book writing process is probably therapeutic as well, and it allowed you to account for everything that's happened so you could own it and move forward.
Yeah, and I know that that's weird because I'm an actor. That's unusual because, that's not the role I'm supposed to play in a way. So yeah, I'm discovering that.
In the book, you cite a lot of toxic relationships. What do you think you've learned from those relationships that have made your current marriage work? And what values will you instill in your child?
Oh gosh, it's heavy. It's a lot. I was thinking about this the other day too, and it's like, my relationship now isn't perfect. It's not easy. Everything is challenging, but I guess that it works because we have that communication. We're able to face anything. We know that we both share the common goal of how we love our child and how we want to raise this person and how we care for one another. I think, both know wholeheartedly that we share that, but it's a lot of work that goes into keeping that working every day. I think what didn't work for me back then was I wasn't ready for that. My first marriage, I was so young. I didn't feel that I was that person that I saw looking back at me in the mirror. I wasn't ready to have a family. I was 20, 21. I'm still figuring out who I am, and I'm 42. So, and with my second marriage, it just, I believe that I was trying so hard, and I talk about that in the book. I wasn't really listening to how my body was responding. I just thought like, well, I'm 27. Like this is how it should read right now on paper. And it wasn't right. So I think now it's just, I believe it's all about communication. I try to be present. It's important for me to feel that I want my child to know that I'm always there. Because I feel like those are the things that I suffered from. I felt like I needed a bit more attention at times and a bit more asking of, how I am and that kind of thing. So I don't want to harass him and be a helicopter parent, but I want him to know that I'm always there for whatever they may need of me.
Yeah, that's so important. And what's your best piece of career advice?
I would say that I think it's so important to listen to oneself. That's something that I feel I learned the hard way. Especially, I think in any line of work or anything in our lives, I felt that I gave my power away a lot. I viewed others as, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this is like wrong. I don't think it's black and white, but to me, I always saw it as separate. I saw it as like, well, if you have that title or you have that degree or you have that, life experience, you must know. And I gave it all away because of that. I didn't listen to my own instincts at any of those moments where I believe I should have. I talk about some of that in the book, maybe being in a position where I felt uncomfortable at a photo shoot. So it's just simply that I felt like no one would listen if I said no, or I didn't want to like make waves. I think it's very important to check in with yourself. Don't lose that sense of self and like why you want to do things. I chose working on particular projects because I was passionate about those, because I wanted to challenge myself, because I at least understood that I didn't want to play the same role over and over again. But that wasn't acceptable in a way. But I wanted to do it because that's what I, was passionate about and what interested me. And so I chose to listen to that. I think that that's important as an artist. We have to do those things because of how we want to do them and not necessarily like in a way that everybody else wants.
Yeah, but I also believe that, especially you started off acting when you were so young, it's easy to get caught up in everything and you don't really know everything. And sometimes you have to make mistakes and you get led down certain paths. And of course, in entertainment, it's what can I do to please an audience? And then you have directors and you have handlers and agents and, all these people around you.
I thought that I was never good enough. I thought that I must not know because they know they must have that experience. And that wasn't always the case. Because then I learned the hard way, just because this person was a manager didn't mean that they were professional and responsible. Right.
Well, and didn't mean that they knew exactly what your needs were either.
Yeah. So it's important, I think, to always keep that. That's what I try to show in the book, is that I found that voice again. I realized and remembered I always had it. And so now I'm, just cherish that.
I love that.
Cherish that and, and use that. Yeah.
And I think the other really important point that you mentioned is, even if you're 90, you might not know everything about yourself. Like we're constantly learning, we're constantly, interacting with new people in different situations and changing as we get older. So
yeah, I would say don't compare. I got stuck in comparison. That was another thing. I mean, yes, the advice could go on, but yes, I mean, that was very true too. I always felt like and I talk about that in the book, if I just did this, if I just like got that into my life, if I just bought that, if I just like put that into my body, then like I had arrived.
Exactly.
And that was so unnecessary. I try to discuss that too, of how I could have probably enjoyed the process a lot more if I hadn't been just over there all the time, focusing on wherever that was that I was going to get. That's also important too. Enjoy the process, right? Trust in the process. I mentioned that my friend Sigal shared with me, and that's so important too, especially in this line of work. I have to do the work that if something didn't work out for me, if I didn't get that role or even if it was all great, that maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe I can just hold compassion and like sit in patience for a second. I saw that. I learned that. And I think we see those things later. We look back and we go, oh yeah, it worked out. But it's hard, like in that moment, to not lose yourself over it, because then we make those rash decisions. And then we say, you know what, it's never going to happen. And I give up. Right. So we don't have to do that.
Yeah. And there's a funny thing about hindsight too, right? It's like, oh, of course, in hindsight, that was smart to not give up. You just don't know how things are going to pan out. I mean, who would have thought we'd both be here?
I talk about how, yesterday I was asked about those tools. That's a tool. That's a tool to use, to remind yourself, oh, remember when I thought that was never going to work out? I mean, the first commercial, my Rice-A-Roni commercial that I talk about when I, came out here and I got my SAG card, I thought it was the worst audition I'd ever had in my life. I thought there's no way I'm ever going to get that job. The casting director absolutely hates me. And it was the job I got.
Funny
and I did all of that. I did all of that unnecessarily to myself. So that's what I try to touch on, right? That's the advice that I got. I mean, again, leave it in the room, right? This kind of thing. Walk away from it. Yeah, because we lose ourselves and then we think like, oh, it's all over. And I've had so many of those moments and it was all fine. And it all worked out in the way that it was meant to.
Nothing's as bad as it is as we think it is in the moment.
It's a good argument.
Well, that's great advice. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.